everyone, it's Nicole from Wiki. Welcome to episode one of Wiki's BBL Supercoach Watch. So Shane, you're back.
Yeah, I am. Look at me. I'm on all the podcasts now.
Well, not very soon. We've I think I said this on our cricket pod that we're gonna have five podcast episodes, all kind of slightly different from next week. So unfortunately, you won't be on all of them real soon, but you're on all the cricket ones, which is all that matters for now. And I was gonna say, usually, if you guys, if you're listening or watching and you watch our cricket pod, usually Shane comes at us with a whole bunch of information, and I'm just shooting the shit, really. But I thought, great, we're in Supercoach land. This is something I'm experiencing and
Yeah.
know a lot more about. But then I realized Shane's notes were all around prices, and because it's a month to go in the season, I haven't really looked at the prices. So once again, you're in the well, you're the person that probably knows a little bit more
Um,
about what we're talking about.
Honestly, well, I wouldn't really say that. It's just like I'm looking at Supercoach for work. I think that's the dream, first of all.
Mm.
So, but I thought, like because we sort of made this decision that, the Supercoach is coming up, the BBL season's coming up. There's just so much more that we want to do, and this is us getting started with that. I thought it would be a good idea because there's still a whole month until the season actually begins to just get some stuff out there, get a little bit of content, a little bit of podcasts, get some of the stuff out. And obviously with no games on, and it's obviously too far away to really predict, oh well, this guy's going to play, so you should get him
Yep.
in, he's in the squad, etc. I thought it'd be just a good idea to look at, maybe do a series of preseason pods and look at, let's say, different parts of the game that we can actually look at right now, and maybe bring in a little bit of numbers and the stuff that we worked on, look at some of the tools and the work that we've done in the past, which I thought might be
Love
fun.
it.
And I thought, hey, prices are fun. We can look at prices. That was my level of thinking on this.
No, it's set up perfectly. So I guess like let's rip straight in. I'll just say a couple of quick things. Well, very quickly before we get started. So if you Google Wiki Linktree, our Discord, all of our cricket content, all of our cricket data tools, everything else, not just for cricket, but we're also covering NBA and NFL, and a whole bunch of other stuff across the next few weeks. And obviously, this podcast that you're either watching or listening, that'll be available on there as well. So just Google Wiki Linktree, and that'll pretty much take you through to the next 2 months or three. Yeah, let's just call it the next 3 months of a whole bunch of BBL related content, and obviously it's the WBBL's on, the World Cup's on, etc., etc. So you can find everything there. That's all I'll say about everything else. But let's rip straight into Super Coach stuff. So Shane, you wanna kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, the game came out a while ago, and we actually had some time to think about it, look at prices, look at teams, look at schedules, look at possible trade strategies, follow up on news. Everyone's following Honeyball, everyone's following everyone else in the Supercoach community. I've actually found out so much about Supercoach. No, so just sort of like for a bit of context, last season was my first ever season playing BBL Supercoach, and I was not good. But I was in my defense, I was um, uh, in the bottom half of a very competitive Supercoach league, which is, if you were around at that time, you'll remember that the Wiki BBL Supercoach League finished seventh out of 105 leagues. So we had some very, very, very good players in there.
Yeah,
Knuckle, I think, was
I
one of
would say
them
though.
who.
Yeah, I was going
Sorry,
to
say
say,
that
sorry,
again.
just very quickly. I think Shane's first attempt at Supercoach reminds me of like when I started playing NRL Supercoach, like I think just after I finished high school, like more than 10 years ago now, where it's like you know the sport, but you kind of want to have fun with your fantasy teams and make picks sort of
Yeah.
based on your own judgment. And I know this pod's about prices, so I won't delve deeply into this, but just the one thing I'll very quickly say is I think the last 12 to 18 months, as like Wiki's gotten some sort of a following, and our social media numbers are going up. And I think I've sort of felt this. I wouldn't say pressure; it's fantasy sport, but like I felt this like expectation of, oh, you run Wiki, you should really know, like you should actually try to do well with your team rather than just have fun with all these crazy picks. So I think what I tried to do last BBL season and this NRL season, I've been around the top 1 or 2% for NRL fantasy, NRL Supercoach, and BBL Supercoach in the last 12 months. Is like I've gone more for like let's try to like get out of the blocks really like or really quickly and kind of establish that sort of
Mm,
top one to five
yes.
percent team in the first round or two, and then basically just
Mm,
like do what you can to
play it safe
survive.
from there.
Whereas yeah,
Yeah.
whereas for like in literally the last 10 years, I've always tried to do wacky stuff at the start, And it's just like,
Mm,
yeah. Anyway, it's like that's all I'm going to say about it now because we'll go into prices.
mm,
But I think I'm really keen to
yeah,
discuss that whole approach side in one of the later episodes closer to the season starting.
sure. And it's clearly worked because you actually had a great season last season. Um, so yeah. Okay, so I guess the first place to start with prices with any BBL Supercoach, any podcast, any content, anything is Matt Short. That's where I want to start. 1103 points last season. Like I think, oh man, this is like 1103 points last season, and the price this season I think reflects that. Um,
Mm.
he's at 244K, one of the I think the two most expensive players in this game alongside Jai Richardson. Um, for good reason, 244K, and I think Richardson's about 247K. I've got those numbers in front of me. Um, I guess with the two most expensive assets in the game, the question that I want to start with, uh, is 244K too much for Matt Short? And is 247 too much for Richardson?
Well, I'm looking at, sorry, if I'm looking away from the camera, by the way, it's because I'm on my phone looking at other resources. So I'm looking at Honeyball's fixtures calendar, and I see that the strikers go single game, double game, bye, and the scorchers go double game, single game, single game. So I think if I had to like pick, and I also know that Jared has had some sort of injury issues recently. So, anyways, let's not think about that for now because we just don't know this early on. But like the silly person inside of me says if you leave Matt Short out that first week, there's four teams with the double and the Heat have a triple. Maybe it could be like
Yeah.
some crazy genius play to maybe leave him out for round one, gamble a little bit,
Mm,
bring him in for his
mm,
double week, but then that's kind of a waste of a trade. That's like the alternative
yeah.
way to look at it. The I guess more straightforward thing is just like, dude, it's Matt Short. He's been in great white ball form in domestic Australian cricket. Just
Yes.
pick him and don't overthink it. Where do you fall on this one?
Yeah, pretty much. I think there's an obvious Matt Short captaincy in round two, rather. Just again, don't think too much about it. I think like one of the sort of like the tone I think of a lot of early season or rather preseason BBL Supercoach discussion I've come across on Twitter or on Discord or wherever is just dude, don't think too much about it. Nisa's got a triple in one, captain him, worry about that later, assuming he's playing, of course. Short's got a captaincy in two, just captain him, worry about anything else later. Only really think about captaincies in
And
three
then
onward. I think that's the
three,
earliest.
and then go Aaron Finch captain round three.
Possibly, yeah, yeah. There's alternatives.
Commentary
I think it's
points.
also because yeah. I think yeah. So, but I think going back to the short thing, yes, I think 247 is probably too much for Jai. Both given I'm very unlikely to captain him in any round. If, like the first round one, he's got a double. I don't want to spend that much if I'm not captaining the guy. With Short, I know that he's got a captaincy in two waiting, so I'm okay with 244K for Matt Short. I think it's also because I have also managed to create a successfully managed to create a team with Matt Short in it, but not Jai Richardson, which I'm actually happy with. I think that's a key part of it as well. Yeah, that's pretty much what I
That's
wanted to
actually
say
a
about Short.
really good point. Sorry, I was just going to say
Yeah.
the one thing I haven't done is I'm purposely putting off actually making my team and playing with it until probably next
Mm.
week when like we've only got 3 World Cup games left and I'll have a lot more time.
Mm.
Yeah, this is probably the podcast that I'm actually not super prepared for. But the one thing I will say is Shane made a great point right there. Like if you are starting to play around with your team, have a look at what your team would be with and without these guys. Because I think for me,
Yeah.
like if I go down the rebellious, silly route of not picking Matt Short in round one to just be an absolute muppet. If I do that, like I'll have to absolutely love my team without him.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say because I haven't actually
Mm.
tried to make a team.
No, yep. That's it. So there's the next sort of tier of players from about 160, 170K to about 200K. I guess with the players like this, the guys that you have in this price bracket, I think there's AJ Tye and Aaron Hardy and people like that. Um, Nisa's another one, Decock, basically players like that. I guess the question there is how many of those can you realistically have? Um, I think initially to start
Mm,
the season for round one, it might not be a problem. Mostly because Heat triple, and obviously you're going to fill your team with 5 Heat players, and obviously you're going to captain a Heat player, and the only player in this price range is Neeser. Or only Heat player
Mm.
in this price range is Neeser. So if he's playing, he's a clear captaincy there. He's, I think, 194K. If you're worried about Neeser sort of going off to play for Australia after that, or you're worried about his availability in general, it's very easy to move Neeser down to somebody else from 194. So
Yep.
you would want to sort of, let's say, you would want to shift the Heat guys in 2 and in 3. And Niso's price makes it very easy to do that. It's one thing that I realized about Supercoach is that as in any fantasy game, that you think you want to go for those you think you want to go for those GPs. Like oh, somebody's like 80K, 85K, 90K. Like yeah, like this guy, he's so good value. Oh, like, oh my god, no, like everyone's sleeping on Joel Paris, and he's gonna tear up the season. But then I realized that um, after 3 rounds of 30 points in a row, and then you start getting itchy feet, and you're like, like I want to get rid of this guy, but you don't have enough in the bank, and this guy doesn't free up enough money on his own. So even just from like a cash cow perspective, I think Nisa is like super valuable from
You've
your
just
team.
described 10 years of PTSD for me in terms of stupid decisions that I made. Because for me, an NRL Supercoach one was the one that I used to always have fun with because I cared a lot more about
Mm,
fantasy. So I used to try to do this
yeah.
silly stuff with NRL Supercoach. But just very quickly, one interesting point, and I think Sushane, I might have told you about the vice captaincy loophole at some point last. I think you didn't know it at the
Yes.
start, and I think I might have told you a
Yes,
little
that's
bit
right.
after. And this isn't
That's
the
right.
episode to go into detail about it, so I won't. The one thing I will say is I haven't looked at the exact fixtures, but if Heat play the first game of the season or maybe the second, I assume they do if they have a triple.
They
But
do.
if they play the first, do they play the first game of the season? Heat?
Yes, they do. They do. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so hear me out here. So you could potentially vice captain Anissa and then
Yeah.
captain Renegade Stars, Scorchers, or Sixers player, knowing that if Nisa guns it, then great. You just vice captaincy loophole, captain a non-player, uh, which will have to be literally a non-player because no teams have the bye that week. But what you
Mm,
could do is if he doesn't do well, then you still like have a shot with the 4 other teams on the double, and that
mm,
think should be a huge like pod play to vice captain Nisa when everyone else is going to. I think that should be a pretty
mm.
big pod play, and you
Yeah.
could theoretically. I'm going back a few years now. This probably isn't relevant anymore, but let's just imagine like a Stoinis in his prime, bowling a few overs,
Mm.
opening the batting in great form, or like a who's a gun for that? Like theoretically, like a Jai Richardson if he's playing the second game
Yeah.
onwards, for example. You could go vice
Yep.
captain Nisa. Oh, wow, he flopped. Great. I will captain a Stoinis or a Maxwell of years gone by. I'm not sure what his role will be this year,
Mm.
but I'm just saying like that's like a tricky little play you could go with, and I'm probably going to talk
Yeah.
myself into something like this.
Yeah. No, I think the fact that the Heat are playing the first game of the season is part of the reason why people have said just captain Nisa, don't think too much about it, because if you start thinking about the loop and the vice captain and all of that, you're unnecessarily overcomplicating what should be a simple decision. Anyway, like I think that's a
And
topic of
it's
discussion
my
for
job
another
to
day.
try to convince you to do some of this silly stuff, by the way. But yeah, let's let's move on.
Oh man. So while you were talking, you mentioned somebody who plays from the second game onwards, like a Jai Richardson. This is kind of relevant because Perth actually play the fourth game. They actually play the last of any of the teams to play. Or sorry, no, it's actually the Hurricanes who play in the fifth game, and Perth actually
Yep.
play in the fourth game, and they obviously have a double. I looked at the Perth squad and I cycled through their prices, and Jai Richardson is not the only one who strikes me as unattractive value at his price range. There's a lot of players in that 170 to 200K bracket. Rightfully so. Scorchers, great team. Won a thrilling final last time, last season. I remember the first season I watched the
Oh
BBL
man,
in
Cooper Connolly,
like ages. Yeah, Cooper Connolly.
what a legend.
But like I look at the Scorchers squad, and I don't know. Maybe there's no clear value that jumps out. I think a lot of people are watching Zach Crawley very, very closely for this reason. He's at 120K, like one of the guys who bats at the top of the order. Potentially like 120K for a starting Scorcher stick is very, very attractive
Yep.
because
Well, I
somebody
think the
like a
only
Nick
thing
Hobson. Yeah.
Yep. So, sorry to butt in. The only thing I was going to say,
Mm.
so Ben from Honeyball made a really good point on
Mm.
one of our group chats. Is that with this English white ball team doing so badly in the World Cup, it could actually mean guys like
Yeah.
Crawley end up getting sent on one of these tours that might disrupt his availability
Mm.
early on. So look, again, we don't
Yep.
know that for sure. I'm just saying, like Crawley will either be like a really good pick at 120K, playing for the Scorchers, etc., or he could just be one of those guys that isn't there. So like I think it's
Yeah.
one that we can go deeper on next time.
Exactly. Oh, definitely, 100%. Yeah. That's pretty much what I agree with Crawley, that he's like that price is what makes you look at him twice, but I don't know if
Mm.
he's the best value going around in the whole game. Um, I think um, I think Laurie Evans should be back in the mix this time. He's 105K. I know guys like Cooper Connolly, Nick Hobson, Sam Whiteman, etc. with five figure prices. Scorchers guys at 5 figure prices, but their role is so small that it might not be worth
Yeah.
looking at. So they're kind of the team of the has and the have nots for prices. So there's the guys at 180, 190, 247K, and there's the guys at
Mm.
60K, 70K, 80K. There's not a ton of options in between for various reasons, as you mentioned with Crawley. I think like maybe if you want to back like Agar or Turner or Evans in the 100Ks, sort of like 100, 105K. But I think with those guys, you'd really get the most out of their price um, if you hold. I think they're a hold in that team to really get the
Yeah.
full value of
And
those
I
points
think
out of.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say so very quickly. I know in NRL Supercoach or fantasy, like the one that I've been obsessed with for over a decade, the main conversation goes around like guns and cheapies, which means like do you pick as many
Mm,
elite players and as obvious cash cows as possible, and then fill your team in
yes.
with a couple of mid ranges, or do you just pick like a
Yes.
whole bunch of value players and then a couple of elite guys and a couple of cheapies around them? And I've always gone the
Mm.
latter for a long period of time, which is why I've been shit at fantasy for a lot of my fantasy career. But in the last couple of years, I've tried to go down more of that sort of guns and cheapies route. And I think this year,
Mm.
looking at the fixtures calendar for Honeyball again, if you've got like 4 teams on the double, 1 team on the triple to start off the
Yeah.
season, you almost like can't be messing around with mid range guys. Like you almost want to like
Mm.
pick your sort of gun double or triple round guys early. Any obvious cheapies,
Mm.
fill them in. It's just like the season to go hard early. Like if you end up picking like
Yes.
a mid
Shorter
range
season.
player, or if you have like and the shorter season actually, that's a great point. But yeah, I'll stop myself
Mm.
there. But I think it's very
Yeah.
very important to get those sort of double and triple round guys and
Mm.
good players in from those teams early.
Yes. No, agreed. I because and you look at the prices this season, you look at Scorchers, you look at all these other assets, you look at whatever. There's a few clubs that have good sort of like good value, sort of like attractive options at like 5 figure prices or even like low six figures. But yeah, like I think the theme that's sort of coming out with this season is don't overthink it. Just go all
Yeah,
in. Just get your guys. Just get your 3 heat guys for the start. Get your 5 heat guys for the start.
yeah.
Get your cash cows. Get everybody. Just don't think about it. Okay.
Cool.
There's another question that I sort of wanted to bring up, and this is kind of related to the tale of the two Toms at 180K in that same price tier. Tom Curran and Tom Rogers at the gates, or rather Curran at Sixers, Rogers at gates. Um, there's a new article on the Supercoach website. So if you go to the home screen where you can see your team, you'll see 5 players that you can't start the Supercoach that you should make sure to start the Supercoach season with. They mentioned Tom Curran in there, which was interesting. Um, and Tom Rogers, I think personally, is the Renegades asset that you really want because they have a double in
Yeah,
one and they double again in three, I think, and they don't have a buy in the middle unlike the Stars. Um, and that's sort of like
that
the sort of Tom
is
Curran, Tom
correct.
Rogers. Yeah, so the Tom Curran, Tom Rogers 180K brings me to the next question that there's obviously guys that you want from certain teams, right? Like a Tom Rogers, great season last time, 180K. He's the guy that you want from that Renegades bowling. But there's always this perpetual struggle between who you want versus good, cheaper alternatives for the same team. So if you're trying to attack a fixture, what clubs are really good for this? That was the question that sort of came to mind. I think the Renegades are one of those clubs because let's say you want Tom Rogers, but you can't really afford Tom Rogers with the current structure of your team. They have a few
Mm.
options, maybe like 40 or 50K cheaper. Adam Zampa's about 131K, doing really well in the
Ooh,
World Cup.
needy wicket
There's
taker.
Kane
Yeah.
Yeah, leading wicket taker, exactly. There's Kane Richardson, who's at 140K, death bowler for the Renegades, another sort of really attractive option there. I think the Stars are, and we'll go a little bit deeper into this later, but I think the Stars are another club that's great for this. And I do think that um, um, this is, I think, the question to ask um, with respect to prices in the shorter season with a lot more doubles, and
Mm,
in case of round one or triple, which is, can you identify your clubs early on who have a good
mm,
sort of balance of who you want versus good cheaper alternatives, so that you can attack fixtures with a lot more clarity? I think the Renegades are
yep.
great for this kind of. I kind of mentioned with Rogers, with Richardson, with Zappa. Yeah.
I think I just wanted to. I just had a quick look while you said that. So the Supercoach website or app are actually really easy to, or like the website is actually really easy to play around with. So I had a quick look at the Renegades players. It may be tricky, but Will Sutherland, 158K, is their state captain for
Hmm.
Shield, I believe. Obviously hitting his straps
Hmm.
as a player. Need to know his role. If he's batting at like a seven and only bowling two or three overs, still he's more of a
Hmm.
real life quality, but not a super coach sort of points kind of guy then. And he's at
Hmm.
158K, so it's not like he's cheap this year. But if he's got a
Yeah.
better role, like he's bowling three or four overs and he's batting closer to like a number five, then hell yeah, I think he's worth considering at 158K. And then the other one I
Hmm.
like is Nick Maddinson at 87. He's so
Yes.
a me
Oh
type of
man.
pick of just like he
Yeah.
bowls, he bats aggressively. You have zero idea what the hell he's going to do. But at that price, he may be one of those guys that it's like, what, like, your cheapest guys are, sorry, I just saw Nathan Lyon at 62K. No, like your cheapest guys are going to be at that sort of
Yeah.
like 70 to 90K range. Nick Maddinson,
Yeah.
if he is batting top three for the Renegades, starting with a double, he might be like your
Hmm.
version of a cheapie. If there aren't
Yes.
any or many min price cheapies, he could be a good pick.
Hmm. Yeah. No, agree. 100% agree. I saw that. I saw Madison's price point, and I was shocked. I thought,
Yeah.
how is this guy? How is this guy a five-figure? And just sort of to come back to the prices thing, I think you can
Yep.
clearly see, and they sort of admitted right away, right, that you can see a couple of guys whose prices have been affected by injury layoffs. Maxwell is obviously one. He's in
Mm,
the 111K or something like that. It's Maxwell on 111K in the BBL. Come on.
yeah.
And Madison is another one. He's at a five-figure price. I also think that
I think
um, weirdly enough, James Vince is kind of. I think he's still a little bit undervalued. If you remember, he came in last season at a five-figure price as well. He was 80 something K maybe. And I still think that
he was
he's
cheap.
starting the
Yeah.
season at one. Yeah, I think he's starting the season at 115K. I think that's still a bit
Wow.
low for him, honestly. He should be at least 10K more. I think there's value there with the Sixers starting with the double. I
Mm.
think given
Well,
the form that
Felipe
he's
and
been in,
Vince are in the early hundreds.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think given the form that he's been in T20 cricket over the last year, definitely worth thinking about. You mentioned Madison at 87K, and I want to get to the under 120K guys and the under 100 guys. But man, my first thought when I saw the prices is Ben McDermott's going to break this game for wicket keepers. I think at that price, 88K is just way too attractive to look past for too long. And you know, uh, like several months ago, way back in the winter when we first started doing the cricket pod, one line that you said really stood out to me when I was talking about Ben McDermott and said, "Man, I know how frustrating McDermott's been over the years. I know it from his bloody Super Bowl scores." And like that was the line that sort of came back to me. And I thought,
Mm.
uh, man, 88K is the kind of price that I can see making people look the other way on his inconsistency. So um,
Oof.
if
I haven't had a look at all the keepers. Sorry
yeah.
but I haven't had a look at all the keepers. But if you're mentioning that McDermott's 88K and Felipe is 102K, are they not almost just like, isn't that your keeper sorted? I'm just trying to think. Like they look like great value then, without thinking about it
Oh
too much
yeah,
deeper.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think there is sort of uh that there is sort of room to say that, hey, you might want to like go big with the wicket keeper, like really pay 180K for like a De Kock
De Kock,
or an Inglis or
Inglis.
somebody like that.
Mm.
Especially with both also have a double in one. Gates have a double in one. Gates also double in three. If you know De Kock's going to start the season, man, with the form he's in, why won't you go for him? Personally, I do think 180K is a bit too much, especially when you have Josh Philippi at 101K, 102K, and McDermott at 88. Personally, I wouldn't start with McDermott. I'd rather start with Philippi. And I've actually got and this is the eternal struggle, right? Do you go Philippi or do you go
Mm.
Inglis? Like, that's
Well, I
the
think it seems pretty clear in that. Sorry, I just looked at the fixtures. I noticed McDermott, he's still playing the Hurricanes, right? Nothing's changed.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like, yeah, they don't have the double. So I guess that changes things a little bit. You could go like a Felipe for the Sixers, has the double to start with and a really good price. And then you kind of have to like pick between Inglis at the Scorchers, who has a double, and then De Kock
Yeah.
at the Renegades, who also has a double, and then another double in round
Mm,
three. So just literally
yes.
first instinct from there tells me I'd go with the Felipe and De Kock combination. You're getting 5 games in the
Mm,
first 3 rounds from De Kock, international,
yeah.
like international player, etc., etc. I'd probably go there, but what would you do?
I'd probably start with Philippi and McDermott. I think Nielsen's sort of also on the table there as well. If you want like a 62K keeper. One thing I will say though, with sort of Philippi versus De Kock versus Inglis, is sort of I just trying to look at the numbers because this is obviously a question that I'm very keen on solving. But sort of
Yeah.
over the last 3 years of um sort of over the last 3 years of the BBL. So that's basically 2020 onwards. And I'm sort of trying to look at the numbers for this right now. And I looked at the fixtures and I look at all the numbers and I look at all this stuff and I realized that so Sixers and Scorchers both double in one. Scorchers and Sixers again, they play one home game each in two and in three. So Sixers at SCG and Scorchers at Optus. Um, and essentially, it boiled down to the fact that since 2020, Josh Philippi has a better record at SCG than Inglis has at Optus, basically. That's what it comes down to, right? So Philippi averages 38 and strikes at 140 at the SCG. I look at um, Inglis in the same time, and at Perth Stadium, he's averaging 26 and striking at 127. So there's a sort of clear
Interesting.
difference there, you know. So they both they both got a double in one, but although Philippi is um he's he had the worst season last time. He had the lower strike rate last time. He had a lower average points and possibly a lower ceiling. And obviously, I think the price difference reflects that quite clearly. But if you're willing to trust sort of like historical numbers on this, I think he's better at SCG than Inglis is at Perth Stadium. So,
Yeah.
given that they have the exact same run of fixtures in the first three, which is a double
Mm.
in one and a home game, one home game each in two and three, that sort of I think influenced my thinking to start with Philippi at the very least.
Yep. And the other thing I would
Start
say
the
just on
season
that
Philippi.
point is that the Scorchers do have 2 buys in a row, round 4 and 5. So it's like it's
Yeah.
almost like if you do have any Scorchers guards, you will have to get rid of them. You can't be holding 180K
Yeah.
ish on the pine for 2 rounds in a
Mm.
row.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you want to sort of
awesome.
use more sort of tiebreakers for this, I mean, I looked at numbers again since 2020, and they are neck and neck. You would not believe this. So since 2020 in the BBL, 46.67% of Philippines innings have ended in 20 plus, which is obviously the qualification you need for the strike rate bonus. For Inglis, it's 46.15%. So we're talking fractions, like percentages, like
Awesome.
it's really really close. I think, and you can see the sort of you can see why they're sort of competing assets, but I think the combination of the fact that over the long term, over the last 3 years, Philippine Inglis are neck and neck, but the fact that he's got a slightly more attractive run of home fixtures plus the lower price makes me want to start with Philippe and Inglis, and Philippe and McDermott.
No, awesome. I'll just very quickly go through a few of the names that you had for us. So, in terms of the guys under 100K because of value option. So, Tanvir Sangha, from
Hmm.
memory, he was injured last year,
Yes.
and he obviously returned to cricket. Mitch Swepson, Darcy Short, Fraser McGurk, who came off that. How many balls did he get that 100
Hmm.
off again? Was it 39 or something ridiculous? Off
I'm
40s?
sure it was. The number of balls goes down every time you mention that innings. So it's probably up to like
Yeah,
five or
yeah.
six by now.
But anyways, Fraser McGurk obviously like broke some records recently. Always feels in hot spots as well, which I think is very important to mention.
Hmm.
Darcy Short, obviously potential, but potential for him to bowl as well. Joel
Mm,
Davies, saw him live at the Thunder from memory. Sorry, is that
mm.
Joel Davies that you had as Jay Davies?
Yes, that's right.
Oh
So
man,
Joel
I
Davies is
got it.
now at
Yeah.
Sixers.
Okay. Right. Right. Um, one weird it had nothing to do with Supercoach, but I saw his arm like when he got a run out when he was a sub fielder, I think, or maybe on his debut, and then I saw him live with a
Mm.
couple of the guys from our Discord actually. Joel Davies' arm, man. Like I am the worst fielder you can possibly imagine, but seeing his rocket arm in person just
Yeah.
reminded me of like this guy is just Jadeja. Like he is Ravi Jadeja. He's I think I might have said this on a pod or on a Zoom call with you guys before.
Yeah.
But oh my
Yeah.
god, he's up. I would literally go to a game just to watch him field, and that is something that I've never said before. I will never say again.
Yeah.
But his arm is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then you got Pete Siddle and Joel Paris. So I think maybe if you want to just maybe pick out one or two of those guys, and then we'll move on to the spinners.
Um, Sure. I think with the guys at the five-figure prices, some of the names that you just mentioned, the question is, are they enablers? Do you get them in so that you can afford the guns, you can afford the high six-figure prices, or do you actually want to start with these guys? I think with the sort of numbers of doubles and the buys around, it makes sense to actually pick some of the cheapies that you stick on the bench to start, because then you can sub the guys out who have buys. So like the Scorchers is buys or the Stars buys into. I think it makes sense to sort of so for example, it makes sense to get Paris because you could possibly start with Paris and then you can shift him to the bench for two, and that kind of what I was thinking about. Which is why I
Cool.
probably pick my cheapies a little bit more carefully this time. I think Tanvir Sangha, if you and again with some guys you just have to wait and see with the role, right? With Fraser McGurk, with Tanvir Sangha, if he's
Yep.
fit, he's looking good. He's been playing for Australia in earlier this year. If he's the starting spin for the Thunder, hell, why not? I mean, 83K is a pretty damn
Mm.
good price for that. Same thing with Darcy Short, Fraser McGurk we talked about. Joel Paris is a stars is a probably a starting stars bowler. Stars have actually got a bunch of players at that interesting price. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say about the
I think
um,
just one thing I'll say on that one to finish off is like I think a lot of these decisions honestly will get at least for me the way that I look at BBL Supercoach, especially now in a shorter season, is like I let the fixtures and the doubles dictate a lot of my decisions. If you guys are on our
hmm,
wiki Discord and you enjoy punting and stuff, you'll see that I'm big on value and I'm big on like let like don't try to make decisions based off your insights when the game is kind of making decisions for you. I'm obviously like I run
hmm,
a sports analytics company, so I am big on my numbers. But I think it's just like there's decision like I can't tell you exact examples because I haven't looked at the fixtures for every team. But I would just say if you're looking at like a pool of players, firstly see who's on their double, and then look at any obvious stuff like role, and then okay, fine. If you're juggling up two players, then go with your gut or who you like more or whatever else. I think like the mistake that some people make sometimes is like they kind of skip the obvious of well the stuff that I just mentioned and they just go, oh no, I think he's going to have a better season. Like you don't want to be doing that with Supercoach because a lot of this stuff is like quite straightforward. So just like you're just cheating yourself really if you're yeah if you're not sort of paying attention to those things and that's what the community is about, right? Like once we get closer to the season or even now, feel free to join our Discord and start asking us questions because I think there's a lot that
hmm.
we can kind of add just from doing the hard work. And there's Honeyball and there's a bunch of other sort of social media accounts that are doing a lot of really good content out there. So obviously we piggyback off the back of that, add our own insights, and we'll be able to help out.
No, I agree. That's actually a great point. I mean, just don't overcomplicate it. I think that's the theme we're coming back to. Let the game make decisions
Yeah.
for you. What I think you can probably use is just so we've actually got a bunch of really cool like stats tools and player comparison tools that you can actually look at which will help you make decisions. Um, so maybe a little bit more carefully. The English v Philippi stats that I was reading out earlier, they were from that, which I'll obviously link in the description. I'll link everywhere you're on the wiki socials. You've probably seen it. But
Yep.
and I can give you an example, like a good sort of example of how to use this. So a lot of people got super excited when they saw Mitch Swepson's price to start the season. 71K for a guy who's going to triple in round one looks very, very attractive. But I also kind of think again with picking your cheapies a little bit more carefully. I think it might be worth. I think in some of these cases, particularly to like pay that little bit extra and get up to like 100,000 or 110K guy, because it makes more sense to pay that 20 or 30K extra. And the reason I say that is because just look at what happened with and Matthew Kuhneman is the comparison point with Swepson, right? So he's 104K versus Swepson 71K. I mean, last season Swepson took 5 wickets, Kuhneman took 16. And just a sec, I'm actually sort of trying to look at the numbers right now, and oops. There we
I think
go.
it's an interesting point you make with those two because I remember last year, like watching them bowl, it was like Kuhneman was on the high. Was it early this year where Kuhneman got the gig in India? I'm just trying to
Yeah,
remember. Yeah, that's
he's
right. Yeah,
undefeated
yeah.
as a Test cricketer in India.
Oh god. Okay, but anyway, it's like yeah, Kuhneman's bowling actually really surprised me because I didn't rate him that much
Mm,
in previous years, but he really did step it up last year.
mm. Yeah, yeah, and the fact that so he actually took 3 times as many wickets as Swepson, more than 3 times as many wickets as Swepson last season, 16 versus 5. Their economy were quite similar, 7.57 for Koolman, 7.7 for Swepson. But man, I think like you just look at the number of times that they went wicketless. For Koolman took at least 1 wicket in 58% of his innings. For Swepson, that number was 30%. I think that's pretty big, because listen, if you're paying for somebody who at most will get you your 30 points and peace out, you may as well
Hmm.
pick the guy who will get you the 30 points, who has a greater certainty of doing
I
so.
love it. Get the 30 points and peace out. I love that.
Exactly, yeah. I feel the same way about Ashton Agar, for example. And of course, Kuhneman got a couple of 3-4s as well. You got a bonus for doing that in Supercoach. And I thought it was quite interesting to look at the percentages of their 3+ over innings, which you need for the economy rate bonus, and their 4 over innings. So with Kuhneman, it was 76%, and with Swepson, it was 92%. So Swepson at least hit his threshold 92% of the time, but he only bowled out 53% of the time. So I thought that was actually really interesting. You're picking somebody
Interesting.
who's doing just enough to be eligible for his economy bonus, but who's not really bowling out. And with Kuhneman, obviously, like a much better wicket taker and with more certainty of bowling out. I thought that was like really, really interesting to sort of throw out.
Awesome. That's actually really cool because like yeah, so Shane's been the one that's been working on a lot of these new tools. And as I said, like I'm sort of massively emotionally invested in the men's World Cup. So I haven't even had to look at any of this stuff. So to hear that, it makes me really excited about like probably the next pod onwards when I can kind of deep dive with you and sort of we can go pick and choose different players that
Mm,
we want to look at. But look, anyways, let's
mm,
we're just about to wrap up. The last point that we wanted to get into was the batting value. I think in that sort of like cheapy
yes.
to mid tier range. I can't believe
Mm,
what I'm reading here because you've got Stoinis, Maxwell, Tom Rogers, Aaron Finch, Sean Marsh, um, Vince, Ollie Davies. There's quite a few players sort of like just over that 100K range. I won't sort of read
yeah.
out any more names, but so Shane, do you want to maybe just pick a couple to finish off and sort of go into like a couple of your key players that you like within that range?
Sure. Yeah. So I think so Knuckles just read out a bunch of those names, and you can tell that there's a lot of batting value in that sort of 105, 110 to about 130K range at Melbourne this year. So whether it's Stonis or Maxwell or Tom Rogers or Finch, Sean Marsh, Nick Maddinson you mentioned earlier at a 5-figure price is incredible. I think
87.
there is a template, and obviously we've talked about the good fixtures that the Melbourne clubs have at the start of the season. Stars double in 1 and 3. So Stars double in 1, 3, and 5, by the way. So that's I think Stars guys you get are a hold at this point. And there's a lot of value there. We just went over. If you see somebody like a Nick Larkin or a Hilton Cartwright do a role that you like, their 5-figure prices as well. Man, there's a ton of value out there in the batting. But there is a
Mm.
template here. I think you can get like maybe 3 or 4 guys in that sort of 110, 115, 120 price range, including your bench. You can get like somebody in that 150, 160, 170 price range, whether you really want an Inglis or a Chris Lynn or Colin Munro if he's starting, or somebody in that range. And you can get one Matt Short. I think that's how you fit Matt Short into this team. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
I
that's how
think
you fit
just
Matt Short
one
into
thing that
this
I'll
team.
say, you mentioned the
Hmm.
the Renegades and the Stars fixtures. I'm just having a quick look at this now. So the Renegades go double, single, double, and then a few singles, and the Stars goes double, by, double, single, double, and then by, single, single, single. So it's just like, as I just said, like a lot of the times I let the game make the decision for me. So I think like by looking
Hmm.
like well, looking at this again, those obviously everyone's going to be thinking about the Heat with a triple to start, but I'm now looking at
Hmm.
the Renegade and Stars even more closely because they both have two doubles in the first 3 rounds. And again, when I say I let the sort of game make the decision for me, I think the other change to my approach I've had, sorry, this is getting a little bit away from prices, but really quickly, the other approach I've had in the last year or two has been plan for the first sort of like, what is this, a 9-round season, right? So plan for the first 2 to 3 rounds at most. Don't overthink the second half of the season. Just attack the first 2 or 3 rounds and plan for that. There will be so much unpredictable stuff happening, whether it's form, whether it's fitness, whether it's like availability to international games. You guys know with the BBL and all the other bloody international matches, and there's like 3 or 4 other T20 comps on at the same time, or T10, whatever the hell's going on. Like, there's just so much chaos. So I just say, those 2 Melbourne teams are becoming really appealing, especially with those value picks that you mentioned.
We just went to discovered, So long story short, you can do this to get Matt Short, but you can't really do it for Jai Richardson because I don't think there's as much good value in the cheaper bowlers. Not at every club, I would say. I think at some clubs, yes, we talked about the Renegades, a little bit about the Stars, but I don't think it's quite as much at some of the other clubs because there, I think the cheaper alternatives are noticeably much worse than I think the more expensive ones, and there's a huge drop off.
Yep. And just one last point on that group of players that you mentioned that's quite cheap. One thing that really stands out to me is like, obviously you've arbitrarily picked out a bunch of good value options, right? When I looked at it straight away, what I thought of is if I've got a pool of Stoinis, Maxwell, Rogers, Finch, Marsh, let's just say that's 5 players at one of the 2 Melbourne teams. The other thing I'd say is like, my personal opinion is always go, if their batting is like somewhat similar, like they've all got, say, theoretically, let's just say they all had top 3 batting roles, right? I would, like 10 out of 10 times, I would go for the guys who also bowl. Like, obviously, it's no, I'm not telling you any secrets to say that Maxwell, someone who fields in the hot spots, will get a few overs and will have a key batting role, is a good pick. I'm just thinking though, like I imagine Finch and Sean Marsh aren't going to be that popular given their age and form, etc. But like a Tom Rogers, for example, I would always go personally Maxwell over him, just because he's got different ways to get points. Like, you could go back yourself in with a Tom Rogers because he does look really good with the bat. But I always just like, again, I try to make as many like hedge my bets a little bit in terms of like, this guy has so many different ways of scoring points. But that's not so much of a hard and fast rule. That's more of a personal preference. But
agree. And just to add on to that, that enables a captaincy. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because that enables you to get a captaincy as well, right? You'd rather captain an all-rounder than a pure stick. Anyway,
100%. No, awesome. Okay, well, I think that's where we're going to wrap up. We're going to have, I think what we'll do from next time, we'll have a little bit more of a lead-in. We'll probably sort of introduce like what we're going to talk about. And obviously now that we've started the Supercoach pod, we'll obviously get like a bit more discussion going in the Supercoach channel and our Discord as well. But as I said at the start, we've got stuff for NBA, NFL, cricket, World Cup, WBBL, and BBL. Obviously, we're talking about Supercoach here. All that stuff is free. You can just check it out if you Google Wiki Linktree, and we will catch you next Monday.